base. Now, I think we'll see how we go with this, because this could be, let's not get political, Simon, but talk about a ladies' shiur. There's going to be a very powerful message here for the men regarding the ladies. So we'll hopefully get there, and they should be cheering. But we'll get to that in due course. What I mean is we are, and in Mirz Hashem, we talk about Balta Acher, delaying. This is all about the mitzvah of delaying. We're on Daf Bob, on the base. And the idea is if somebody says that they want to bring a korban, then they must bring it within a certain time frame. The halacha we're talking about is 3 regolim. So a person says they want this animal to be a korban, a shlomim, for example. They have 3 Yom Tovim, because as we know, sadly, until not there's time for that. Next week, Yom Tov. A person has 3 regolim when they're anywhere coming to Yerushalayim. So they've got 3, it's like 3 and out. You've got 3 opportunities to bring that promised korban that you said you would. And then there's an Avera which comes in, which is the Avera, what's called Balta Acher. And as we say, delaying, we are now about 15 lines up on Vav Amud Beis. And the beginning of the line is the word Chamisha. Do you have that word Chamisha, 15 lines up or so?
Yep.
Actually, it's 14 lines up. There you go. Yeah, Chamisha, you got it? And we're now picking up, this is the final, people may be pleased to hear, maybe not. This is the final piece on Balta Acher. Don't say hip hip hooray, but this is the final piece on Balta Acher. It's got some thumbs up from some people there. Oh, no, you want to continue on Balta Acher, we know that, we know. Right, let's get some pictures of some people. And with the word Chamisha, so there's some final points that we need to clarify on Balta Acher. The first one is a very interesting halacha. Boy Rabbi Zera, the great Rabbi Zera, asked the following question on Balta Acher. What is the ruling regarding a Yoresh? What is a Yoresh? A Yoresh is someone who inherits things. Mahu Balta Acher. Someone who inherits, so sadly the father's passed away, but he has inherited, and we'll pick this up here. Have a look, Rashi just says, good. Have you got the Rashi just opposite? It's the Yoresh Mahu Balta Acher, about 10 narrow lines up in Rashi. Yoresh Mahu Balta Acher al Neder Oviv. His father made a Neder and said he was going to bring, for example, this korban. Sadly, he passed away. So now what happens? Now look at the Tosfos, where it says Yoresh Mahu Balta Acher, the 4th Tosfos up. Have you got that? 4th Tosfos. Mahu Balta Acher. Do Yoresh Chayiv Lahovi. That's a fascinating point in itself. There's an obligation. Normally, people think an inheritance, they just pick up the money, but it's more than that. They actually also have a chiyuv. Chayiv lahobi, the whoever is the Yoresh has the responsibility of bringing that item which was meant to be a korban, which his father should have brought. And there's a Mishnah in Maseches Kinin, some very tough Mishnahs there in Kochim. Charles, something to look forward to. Actually, the last Mishnah of Kinin is a real tough. I mean, you need those learning Mishnah Yomis, when that day is, you really do need quite a lot of time. It's a very tricky. It's work where a person brings a kan means a pair. Let's say, for example, a lady has to bring a pair of korbanos, which is 2 birds. She brings a korban, and they get mixed up. And the question, they got mixed up with other people who don't know which one's which. How many do you need to select? Wonderful. If you're into statistics, it's a great opportunity. Working out probabilities and possibilities of whether it's the right korban or not and what I'm meant to do with it. Anyway, that's the end of Kinin, right at the end. But before we get that far, there's a Mishnah which Tosfos mentions, and it's been brought in Kamaduchni, various other places. It talks about Ha'isha, for example, a lady. She brings the chatos to the Beis Hamikdash, and then she dies. Yoviu Yorshim Oilosa. A chatus can only be brought by the person themselves, but an oila, a burnt offering, must be brought by whoever is inheriting her. So therefore, we can see from there, we'll just stop there. So in other words, there is this chiyuv which passes on to the yoresh, whoever is inheriting. They have this obligation to bring the korban. Now the question is now, on this korban, is there going to be the delaying avera or not? They never made the neder. They never promised anything. They're picking this up with the inheritance. And have a look at the Gemara. Have you got it? Again, back to the word chamisha. Boy Rab Zera, Yorish Ma'balta Acher. The Pasuk says, as we've seen so many times over the past weeks, Ki Sidar Neder, yeah? If you make a neder, you make a promise, then the end of that pasuk says, Lo sa'acher l'shalmo. You shouldn't delay in bringing it. Omer Rachmona. That's what the pasuk said. Rachmona, the Almighty, said in that pasuk, when you make a neder, don't you delay, but you've got your 3 Yom Tovim to bring it. V'ho lo nodar. The person who's the inheriting everything from the parents, they didn't make the neder. So therefore, yes, of course, they should try and do as much as they can. And of course, there's an obligation that they must bring that korban, but they will not fall foul, as we said before, of the avera of delaying. Maybe, says the Gemara, Oy Dilma, or perhaps next line, there's another pasuk, which we've brought very often, which says, Uvoso shoma v'havesem shoma. When you come there, that's when you should bring all the korbanos you should really, or you're mechuyev to bring, you're obligated to bring. So there, uvoso shoma v'avesem shoma. This individual is mechayev to come, or mechuyev to come to Yerushalayim. When it comes to the Regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, he will have to come to Yerushalayim. So the Pasuk says, when you come, bring with you all your obligations. Well, he's got an obligation to bring that korban, which he got from his parents who passed away. As they're linked, I might have thought that you've got to bring the korban, and with it, the delaying factor, that if a person delays beyond those 3 Yom Tovim, they will also fall foul in a Savera, which they're picked up really from the parents. So they're the 2 ways of looking at this question of Rab Zera. Do you say it's only the person who makes the neder, he is the one who has this potential avera of Baal Ta'acher? Or do we say no? It's on the other individual. He's got an obligation. He picks that up, as we saw from Tosfos in this Mishnah, that it's beferish that a person picks up the chiyuv to bring the korban from the parent. And as the pasuk says, when you come, you bring. So when you come, you bring it. And as you're meant to bring all those korbanos, in other words, it fits into the same pattern as we said before. You've got 3 regalim, therefore, before the person would have fallen foul of the avera of Baal Ta'acher. Says the Gemara, I've got a proof for this. Tor Shema, come in here. The Tony Rab Chia, the great Rab Chia, which actually was earlier than Rab Zera, close to the level of a Tana, and he's got lots of brises. In his brise, it said, the Pasuk says, Ki Hashem Elokecha me'imoch. Hashem will search out those people who do not bring the korbanos in the right time. Me'imoch, from you. And there's a brisa which learns from this word me'imoch. The pasuk says, when you make a neder, you shouldn't delay. And then the pasuk says, because Hashem will search out me'imoch, from you if you are late. So therefore you see very clearly me'imoch means from you and not from the Yorish. So we're learning from this brisa of Rab Chia that the ruling of Baal Ta'acher does not apply to a Yorish. Says the Gemara, just 1 minute. Those people who've got a bit of a memory may remember on the previous page, turn to Daf Hey Omid Base, if you've got a Gemara, Have you got where we went right through this whole posuk?
Sorry, Norman.
Yes.
Previously, we've said that various korbanos, there are some korbanos that you make and some korbanos that fall upon you, such as the Bechor, the Maestras, the Bechor, and the
Yes.
Pesach.
Yes.
So those are ones which the obligation descends on you, rather it might to the Yoresh. But Balta Aches still applies even if you haven't made a conscious, so you enter into the obligation rather than make the obligation.
Yes.
Why wouldn't the Yoresh be the same situation?
Good question, and that's why the posuk especially says "Mei imoch." We've got other pasukim which include other things. Hold on a minute and see.
Mei imoch, the Yoresh then becomes the imoch for the olam.
Okay, hold on. See if we answer your question. If we don't, please come back. Look at the Gemara and Daf Hey Amud Beis, because in fact the Gemara says went right through this posuk. Have a look about 8 lines down where it says tzedakos, and then it says Mei imoch, from you. This word imoch also means zeleket shikha umpeah. So the Gemara is saying, and turn now back to our Gemara. Parat liyorish. Got it? At the beginning of the line it says liyorish. Yeah? V'hai mei imoch, says the Gemara, this word mei imoch is already being used. Mi boyele zeleket shikha umpeah. So what we're saying is this. We went right through that whole list there, and there was a massive list. One of them included there was Pesach and the other korbanos which just fall upon you. Okay? One of the rules was also Mei imoch, telling you, I'm using the word Mei imoch. Imoch normally means with you. With you means the poor people. It's the poor people that do you remember the leket shik compare the certain gifts that go to the poor? Don't delay, don't hold back if you actually took them by mistake. Don't delay and give them back to the poor. So that comes from the word Mei imoch. You with me? Hold on. So we've got this word Mei imoch, says the Gemara. I'm already utilizing it to tell me that this delaying rule applies to gifts to the poor. It's not available for your Mei imoch to say only from you and not from the Yorish. Okay? That's the Gemara's question. Got it? We learned from this word Mei imoch that the lo sa'acher only applies to the worst person who made the neder, because it says Hashem will only search Mei imoch from you, where you never made this neder. So it's not your fault. It says, I can't learn that, because this word Mei imoch is already being utilized, as we saw in the previous daf, in Daf Hey Amud Beis, to tell me it applies to the poor people, Mei imoch. So don't learn, you cannot learn one word for two different things. You can't learn it to say from you and not the Yorish, and from you, the word imoch meaning the poor. Says the Gemara, keep going. Says the Gemara, beginning of line li Yorish. V'hai mei imoch mi boile is needed, ze leket shikha umpeah. Says the Gemara, korile imoch, for korile mei imoch. What does that mean? Have a look at Rashi. The Apostle could have said, Ki doresh Hashem Elokecha imoch, with you. What's mei imoch? So have a look at Rashi. Korile imoch. Imoch means with you. It's a synonym or an alternative word for the people that are with you, meaning the poor people. You're also obliged to ensure they get their gifts in the right time. With me? Have a look at Rashi. V'dorish beitate. This word is available to learn two different things because there's the prefix. You've got the word mei imoch. Have a look at Rashi. De imoch mashmilei chelko shel oni. The word imoch means don't delay giving. Imoch, who's with you, the person's with you, normally the poor people, you're responsible for them. Make sure they get their gifts in the right time. Continues Rashi, I've got a mem yisera. I've got that little mem at the beginning, which limits this, Anthony, in some way. May means from. I've got a group, and those psukim that we looked at in Daf Hey Omid Base went through that whole list of the items you mentioned, so they're definitely included. So I'm including all of those, I'm including the poor, and then I've got a mem which reduces in some way. Says Rab Chia, the tradition is that it's been reduced in some way. Not all the whole group that we mentioned previously, including all the items you mentioned, Anthony, but it's reducing in some small way. And which way does that work? It's from you, but not the Yoresh. So you're right, there are other examples which just fall on you. For example, if it comes to other chiyuvim that you may have had, where you do have to, for example, achatos or whatever it is, you've got to bring this, is fallen upon you. Any example, all those are included. This little prefix, the letter at the beginning of the word, reduces the chiyuv in some way. And the way it's reduced is by limiting and taking out of bounds, as it were, the Yoresh. The Yoresh, therefore, is free and is not mechuyev in this Baal Ta'ach. Yes, he has a chiyuv, an obligation, but he does not have an avera which attaches to it. So I hope that answers the question. Now, the other examples are specifically mentioned. This is a mem which is reducing in some way, and it's reduced it just from the Yoresh.
Would that apply across the board? So if somebody's suggested to give tzedakah and is nifta beforehand, there's no Baal Ta'acher on the Yoresh?
So, yes.
If somebody's designated a Korban Pesach and is nifta before Pesach.
And if it's only the Yoresh, you're quite right. If it comes through the Yoresh will be exempt of Baal Ta'acher. Quite right.
So that Korban Pesach, what would become of it? Would it?
Well, we said that would become a shlomi, wouldn't it? I mean, so it's if it's what will happen anyway? He passed away. I mean, so what's going to happen? He broke shlomim for himself.
He was going to. On Erev Pesach, the person who was going to bring it was nifta. So what happens?
Yeah. So what's going to happen to that? Yeah. I mean, is he the only person included on that list, or was there other people? He was going to have the whole korban himself. It's going to be rare.
Maybe the whole family was nifta and the.
Okay, you're right. Then the possum becomes a korban. It would become like a shlomim. You have to say the family without the children.
Yeah, and they'd be able to. They'd have as long as they wanted to bring it. To bring
korban. Yeah, in those examples, or tzedakah as well. You'd say the same thing. According to this, the mem just takes out. It reduces in some way. All those other examples are there, but in some way, the mem says from, which is, it's like a reducing, cutting off a little bit of a corner here, saying that the Yoresh is not part of this. That's what we're saying here.
So if somebody leaves in a will that they want their children to give tzedakah, the children could, in theory, delay that indefinitely. I mean, it's not.
There would not be a Baal Ta'ach here, absolutely. There'll be a chiyuv, they've got a mitzvah to do it as soon as possible. They were always saying is you're not falling foul of the Aveira, but of course there's a positive mitzvah to do. There's a mitzvah to give it as soon as possible. And that we said before, when you come and bring, you have a chiyuv, as you saw from Tosfos. You have a chiyuv to bring it, but you just don't have an Aveira. You've got a positive mitzvah to do rather than the negative. So you still should bring it as soon as possible, as we said before. Yeah? So back to our Gemara. That is the answer we have for Rab Zera on his Yoresh. And there's one final question in Baal Ta'acher. We've always linked Baal Ta'acher with coming to the Beis HaMikdash for the Yomim Noraim, not the Yomim Noraim, Sholosh Regalim. Yeah? That's how it's linked. And that's why you've got 3 regalim, a whole year's worth. We discussed that last time. You've got a whole year's worth of regalim because you're coming anyway. When you come, make sure you bring your korban that you stipulated was going to be a korban. Says the Gemara, boy Rab Zera. This is the last. There's going to be another question, but not on Baal Ta'acher. Boy Rab Zera. Isha mahi Baal Ta'acher. What's the ruling about a lady with Baal Ta'acher? What are the two sides to the argument? There's always two sides to an argument. Says the Gemara, Mi omrinon halo machayva b're'iyah. She does not have a chiyuv. Re'iyah means to be seen. Yeah, lo yeroeh lecha. The mitzvah of bal yeroeh does not, being seen in the Beis Hamikdash, coming with your korbanos, does not apply to ladies. That doesn't mean they're less important, as we constantly mention, in case it's being taped. But look at Rashi.
You mean if it's not being taped, if it's not being taped, it means they're less important.
Don't we had up for? I see the RECs on the top. So what? Yes, we need to watch. Halo machayva b'riyah. Have a look at Rashi here. The chsiv, and people are familiar with this pasuk. It says yeroeh when it comes to the shalosh regalim. Yeroeh kol zechurcha. All the males need to come to the Beis Hamikdash. It's an exemption for the ladies. They don't have to come. That's the point. Yeroeh kol zechurcha, a chiyuv for the men to come to. Nobody's saying they can come if they like, but there's no chiyuv on them to come. Very interesting. Kivan de lo machayva lemeisik, as she does not have a chiyuv to come to be ola regel, lo shayich bo zman regolim. The regolim that we brought was as a time that you're coming anyway to the Beis Hamikdash, because you have a chiyuv of ola regel. Bring the korbanos, but the ladies aren't coming anyway. As they're not coming anyway, the idea of the shalosh regalim, yes, of course, it's Yom Tov for her, but she's not coming up. There's no chiyuv that says yeroeh kol zechurcha.
But you can bring the shlomim. Norman, you can bring the shlomim at any time.
Yes.
Not on Yom Tov. Yom Tov is only there as a time signal for the Baal Ta'acher.
Why Yom Tov?
It doesn't mean literally you have to bring it on Yom Tov. You have to bring it.
But why Yom Tov?
Pardon?
Why Yom Tov? Why is Yom Tov? Why is it Yom Tov? Why don't you say the 1st of Cheshvan or something? The Yom Tov we learned was there because the Yom Tov, you're coming anyway, Uvosem Shom, when you come, bring those korbanos, and you've got 3 opportunities. The ladies aren't coming. They don't have a chiyuv to come. So maybe they have an indefinite.
She's inherited this.
No. We finished inheritance.
Oh, I see.
I'm sorry, it's nothing to do with that. We finished now. Inheritance does not apply. Baal Ta'acher doesn't apply to inheritance. So now we got a lady on her own, maybe, or as part. She made a neder. A wife could have made a neder. She made a neder and it stands, but she doesn't have to come to the ola regel. So maybe the whole point of the shalosh regalim is not relevant to her. Or what is the other side of the argument? Back to our Gemara. Beginning of the line is Omrinon. Have you got Omrinon? Holo machayva b'riyah. Oidilma, or perhaps Ho'isi b'simcha. There's a mitzvah of, it's a Yom Tov Dika mitzvah. There's a Yom Tov Dika mitzvah which tells us v'somachta b'chagecha. This is very interesting. Have a look at Rashi. Oidilma, or perhaps machayva lemesek. She is mechuyev to go up because of simcha. Why? Because the pasuk says v'somachta b'chagecha. V'omar mar, the Gemara in Psachim, bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim ein simcha ela babosa shalomim. And that's learned out from a pasuk. It says v'zobachta shlomim v'yochalta shom v'somachta. The simcha we normally talk about is not just a simcha of having some schnapps. It's a simcha of eating the korbanos. Now, she has a mitzvah of a somachta v'chagecha. There's no zechurcha which says she's excluded from the mitzvah of a somachta v'chagecha. Interesting, you may ask, it's a mitzvah sasei shas mangaroma. So there's the teretz given, Diana Bramsky's got a piece on this, that the somachta v'chagecha is part of the Yom Tov Tika halachas. Like it's called Shabbosoin. We know that there are various called malachas are forbidden on Yom Tov. This is part of the Yom Tov itself. The Yom Tov has with it It has with it certain negatives, but it's part of the Yom Tov, v'somachta b'chagecha. It goes with the Yom Tov itself. It's not time-bound in that way. It's together with the Yom Tov. So what we're saying is this. The ladies have, what we're saying here is the ladies have a mitzvah v'somachta b'chagecha, which means they have to eat shlomim. That's the definition of simcha. It's wonderful to come into the Beis HaMikdash, a korban is brought, and of course, going up to Shomayim, you've got certain parts of which are burnt, certain parts of which with the Kohen has this. It's wonderful, the relationship and this connection with everybody. That is the definition. Eating and joining with those other groups is considered, we learn from a pasuk, simcha. So if that's the case, she is coming up to Yerushalayim. There's a mitzvah b'somachta b'chagecha, which means she's coming to Yerushalayim as well. So therefore, she should be part of the Aveira of Baal Ta'acher. We said until now, the one side was there's no mitzvah to be seen and to bring your own korban. That's true, but she's got to eat a shlomim. She's got to partake of shlomim. You can only eat the shlomim in Yerushalayim. She doesn't have to get further in to what they call the Azora area, bringing the actual korban, but outside she'll have to come. She's coming to Yerushalayim itself, the outside, the whole of Jerusalem, in which case, the Gemara is suggesting, as she's coming up to Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim, she's not going into the Beis HaMikdash area. She doesn't have a chiyuv. The men have a chiyuv to actually bring that korban into the Beis HaMikdash area. If they're bringing that, then of course they'll have to bring anything else, which is Baal Ta'acher. Ladies don't have to come into the Beis HaMikdash, but they've got to come to Yerushalayim. For the Gemara suggesting on the other side of the argument, as they're coming to Yerushalayim anyway, they might as well bring with them that animal, and then they'll ensure that any korban which they're bachir, not talking about Yerusha here, of their own decision to bring a korban, they should have to bring it, and therefore they've got the 3 Yomim Tovim. So again, the question about the lady is this. Do we say she does not have to bring a korban and go right into the Beis HaMikdash area, and therefore she's exempt of the Aveira of Baal Ta'acher, or do we say she's going to be coming anyway to enjoy Shlomim, because the Somachta B'Chagecha applies to her. As she's coming up to Jerusalem, maybe as part of Baal Ta'acher, she should ensure that any promise she's made about bringing korbanos apply to her too. Says the Gemara, very interesting. Omale Abaya. Abaya says back, V'tepekle, do isa b'simcha. You've answered your own question. You've just said she's in the mitzvah of a simcha. So that's the end of that. V'tepekle. Why are you bothering to ask me? I know you told me there's no mitzvah to bring a korban, but she has to come up to Yerushalayim. You've answered it yourself. So in other words, he's suggesting, because there's this mitzvah of somachta b'chagecha, ladies are also included, and as we define the simcha, it means eating a shlomim in Yerushalayim. They're coming up to Jerusalem, therefore they are also included in the mitzvah of Baal Ta'acher. Says the Gemara, Abaya, that's a very funny comment you just made. Says the Gemara, Umi Oma Abaya Hochi. Abaya, what do you mean? They've got to come up for the mitzvah of Simcha. For Oma Abaya, so the Gemara is now challenging, it sounds like the Gemara said in the name of Abaya. Years later, somebody's saying Abaya couldn't possibly have given that answer. Why not? Because he got another statement in the name of Abaya. Umi Oma Abaya, for Oma Abaya, 4 lines up, Isha Bala Mesamcha. Wow. There's a mitzvah of simcha for ladies. But Abaya holds it's really the mitzvahs on the man. She does not have a separate mitzvah in her own right. Amazing. Look at Rashi. Bala Mesamcha. This is the view of Abaya. There was a machlekes, but Abaya holds that there's a mitzvah of simcha, but not, it doesn't mean eating korbanos. And look at this. Certain colored clothes, beautiful clothes. In Eretz Yisrael, they wore beged pishton, which was like a linen, white clothes. Hamaguhosim, very well ironed, beautiful, lovely begodim. Hochi isa b'kiddushin. So Rashi is learning there may be a mitzvah of samachtu b'chagecha, but it's not eating korbanos. She doesn't have to come to Yerushalayim. Okay, that's Rashi. Tosfos says, look at the last Tosfos. Pirush b'kundras b'boba b'bigdei tzivonim eretz Yisrael b'bigdei pishton. You with me? So what is Rashi getting at? He's saying, how could Abaya say that ladies in their own right have a mitzvah to eat shlomim and therefore are coming to Eretz Yisrael? No, the mitzvah is to give them nice clothes, nothing to do with coming to Yerushalayim. Says Rabbeinu Tam, I don't understand Rashi. V'kashna Rabbeinu Tam. Why? Tahani Mili, that Gemara that Rashi mentioned is talking Bizman Hazer. Nowadays, it's not true. Ain simcha ela babos in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, which means that's where we're talking about bringing those korbanos. How could Rashi say this? And therefore, Rabbeinu Tam has a different pshat in the Gemara. It still will help us, as we'll see. Drop down a bit. 3 lines from the end. Hope I'm not confusing you. Umafarish Rabbeinu Tam, when our Gemara says Ba'alo Masamcha, different to Rashi. Rashi learned Ba'alo Masamcha means it's up to the husband and it's clothes rather than eating from the korbanos. Rabbeinu Tam says, yes, she does have to actually eat korbanos. But look at this. Ba'alo Masamcha shachiv al ba'alo lo aleha. What the Gemara means, according to Rabbeinu Tam, is when the Gemara says Ba'alo Masamcha, she doesn't have a chiyuv in her own right to eat the korban. He has a chiyuv to make sure she eats with him. Lefichach lo korinon be'ubosa. She's only coming because of his sake, not in her own rights. That's the way Rabbeinu Tam is learning. Okay? Now, let me tell you what this means. There's a very interesting halacha. It's brought in Hilchos Purim, actually. And when it talks there in Hilchos Purim about the Sudas Purim, a very interesting halacha. He quotes there the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Tar Tzadiyeh, 695. He writes, when you're having your Sudas Purim, Yekabetz anshe beiso v'chaveiro. I know we often talk about lahavdil, going to drinking and drowning your sorrows, but if you want to be besimcha, says the Mishnah Berurah, Yekabetz anshe beiso v'chaveiro. You can look it up in the Mishnah Berurah, Tov Reish Tzadiyeh, Sivkot and Tes in the Mishnah Berurah, and he says the following words: De'i efshal yismayach kora'u b'yochid. A person cannot. Yeah, I'm talking about drowning sorrows, maybe. But if you want to be b'simcha, you have to do this simcha with other people. And what we're saying here, when it says v'samachta b'chagecha, what you've got to do is, yes, ensure that the wife will be eating the korban, but that's not in her own right. It's only to enhance the whole simcha, and for the man who has the chiyuv to come and oile regel, v'samachta b'chagecha means it's got to do and ensure that everybody else is happy with him. You can't, if everybody else is sad and you're that's not called a simcha. A simcha means ensuring other people are also enjoying the simcha with you. And therefore, what this Gemara means is the following, according to Rabbeinu Tam. Again, according to Rab Zera, we're saying that they have an intrinsic chiyuv in their own right to eat. V'samachta b'chagecha is a chiyuv for them. Says Abaya, no, just go back a minute. If there was a chiyuv for the lady to be besimcha in her own right, then we said just like she's got to come to Yerushalayim to eat the korbanos in her own right, therefore she has sadly the Aveira of Bal Ta'acher in her own right if she delays bringing korbanos. Says Abaya, interesting, Abaya gave that answer for Rab Zera. We're now challenging and saying, but Abaya never said that. Abaya is of the opinion that Ba'alo Mesamcha, which means she does not have a chiyuv in her own right, even if she has a chiyuv to eat korbanos in Yerushalayim at the time of Yom Tov, that's not because she has a chiyuv. He has the chiyuv to ensure people are happy, and in particular, ensure his wife is happy. So therefore, she does not have a chiyuv. If she does not have a chiyuv in her own right, she therefore will be exempt from Bal Ta'acher. Okay, that's the question of the Gemara. So are we clear about the Gemara? The Gemara asked the question, what about a lady in Bal Ta'acher? So we say the lady, there are two ways of looking at it. It says the Gemara, a buyer saying back to Razeh, a lady has a chiyuv in her own right. Therefore, Bal Ta'acher will apply. We're now challenging this statement from Abaya and saying, what do you mean? How could Abaya have said this? Abaya is of the opinion that Ba'alo Mesamcha, she does not have a chiyuv in her own right. Just continue the Gemara, you'll see the ending of this. Answers the Gemara, this is the final few words, hold on. Lidvorov de Rab Zera ka'omar. It's true. Abaya is of the opinion that the chiyuv is not on her of Simcha. The chiyuv of Simcha is on the husband because he can't be b'sameach on his own. He's got to ensure the wife's happy too. Important point. There's no chiyuv on the lady, and therefore Abaya would be of the opinion there's no Aveira of Bal Ta'acher. Abaya, however, when he gave this answer and saying that they've got a chiyuv in their own right, he was going back to Rab Zera and saying, you Rab Zera, don't you hold that they've got a chiyuv in their own right? As they've got a chiyuv in their own right, therefore it's true they don't go right into the Beis HaMikdash, but they're coming to Yerushalayim. Therefore, they will be full foul of Bal Ta'acher. So it goes like this. Abaya's answering according to the view of Rab Zera, who holds that ladies have a right and a chiyuv of their own in Simcha, therefore they will fall foul of Bal Ta'acher. It's true, Abaya doesn't subscribe to that view. But he was answering back saying, Rab Zera, I've got an answer for you. You will hold that they will fall foul of Bal Ta'acher because they have a chiyuv in their own right. I won't hold this, by the way, because I think there's no chiyuv in their own right to come up to Yerushalayim. They're doing it because they've got to ensure the Somach B'Chagecha applies to the husband, Ba'alo Mesamcha. Are you with me? So therefore, we have a machlokas here between Rab Zera. Somebody else, something.
So according to them, the opinion that they don't have a chiyuv in their own right, when I go up to Yerushalayim with my wife and there's only enough meat for one of us, she has to watch me eat?
What would you anyway? So what do you meant to have half each?
I've got a chiyuv and hers is...
It's a korban shlomim. There'll be.
Well, if there's not enough of a share for one of us, there's a tiny bit which we might be sharing.
Well, it's like in 1 minute, excuse me. What happens if you have a glass of water? Remember the one in the desert? There's no point dividing it up. You're both not doing a mitzvah. What is the point of dividing up something? You're going to have to, the best, you're going to have to toss a coin. If you've only got a kazayas of food left for some reason, somebody will do a mitzvah, somebody won't. So why you have to decide yourself?
You're saying her mitzvah is dependent on mine.
Yes.
So it sounds like I've got a stronger mitzvah than she has.
Yes.
And therefore, I should be the one to eat, and she should be the one to watch.
When you say watching, somebody's got to do. You've got to decide who's going to do. Yeah. You know, if there's only one kazah, it's always like that. One glass of water. But
I'm fulfilling the mitzvah. It's not a cake, but I'm fulfilling a mitzvah. Her mitzvah is dependent on my eating. You've said.
You've got to be ensured that
she's a nochshleper
as well.
To the mitzvah.
You're right in that example. You're right in that example. In Bisman Beis Hamikdash, you'd have to give us. What you could do is bring another shlomim. You'd have to go and bring another shlomim. Sorry, it'll cost you money. You've only got a kazait, so you'd have to put your hand in your pocket and bring another shlomim for her. You've got to ensure she is happy with you. You're not fulfilling your mitzvah of simcha properly if you're happy and she is not.
And doesn't apply to my daughters.
That's going to be very interesting. That's very interesting because it's going to be a nafka here between these two views. You see, normally we'd say not just you, whichever way you learn, the mitzvah of simcha, you've got to ensure that not just you, but the wife and the family, everybody who's dependent upon you, they've all got to be happy. You can't be happy, and that's a very powerful midah. You know, sometimes people say quite the contrary, and that's such a negative midah that everything's all right for me, don't worry about anybody else. That is not the Yiddish behavior. I say the concern is, we say, especially we talk about in today's times, when Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh, if someone else is upset, it should upset that individual. Someone's unwell, we should be davening for them. Someone's happy, I'm happy too. And that, you know, it goes back to the mitzvah, we say, says the Ramban, you can't expect to love someone. I mean, especially as I mentioned before, you mentioned, Anthony, you talk about a glass of water. You're in the desert and you own a glass of water and that's going to save somebody. It's your water. You're not mechuyev to give it away. Says the Ramban, though, this is very important. Look at that beautiful translation. You should love what your friend will get as much as you want for yourself, which means this. If there's no reason why you shouldn't daven, you want to be healthy, you want to be successful, you want the panosah to come through. Why shouldn't you daven exactly the same way for your friend? It shouldn't stare you. I mean, I say there is sadly a bad midah that, yeah, it's everything. I'm great with me, and I don't mind looking on someone else who's not as fortunate. That is not v'ahavta recha kamocha means you should wish him le recha as much as you wish for yourself. There's plenty out there. Hashem with his Pesachas Yodecha Maspir Chol Chayrotzen can give panosah to everybody. There's no reason it just should be for me and I should watch on where this person's struggling. So v'ahavta l'recha kamocha means love for your friend, whatever you wish. I wish myself good health. I wish myself panosah and everything should go well. I wish the same for my friend. And that's what we're saying here in this mitzvah of simcha. Simcha means you're not just sitting and I'm, enjoying myself with all the food, but it's all for me. Sorry, my mitzvah haftarecha kamocha. Haftarecha kamocha means ensure that every person who I say is you're responsible for, and in fact it goes even further than that. It's not just those you're responsible for, all the aniyim. And that's why when it comes to kimcha de pischa or other occasions with Yom Tov, ensure those needy also have sufficient. How can you sit, and we'll talk about this in 1 minute, there was wonderful Lashon of the Mishnah Berurah, if someone else is not enjoying, how can you be enjoying your Yom Tov if you know that other people are not? That's crucial. And therefore, whichever way you look here, either the chiyuv is actually on the lady herself, but if it's not on the lady herself, there's certainly a chiyuv on the man to ensure she's happy. The difference for halacha in those nowadays is minimal, because the man is got to ensure that the people who he's responsible for are happy. The only difference we said was balta acher. Balta acher, we said, it depends which way you learn. If you learn like Rab Zeir, which is the way the Rambam paskins, according to Rab Zeira, then there is a chiyuv on the lady in her own right. If there's a chiyuv in her own right, then she will fall foul of Bal Ta'achim, but she's got to come up to Yerushalayim in her own right. If, however, you learn like Abaya, that yes, she's got to be happy on Yom Tov, but it's really because the master of the house has got to ensure everybody's happy. She does not have a chiyuv in her own right, and therefore there will not be an avera of Bal Ta'achim. It looks like Anthony's got something to say.
And just not on the Bal Ta'achim, if I can afford a plane ticket and a sheep or a dress for my wife, which should take priority? I mean, if I've got a mitzvah to be v'samach, if I've got a mitzvah to be mesameach her, then I. Are you talking about
nowadays or in Bisman Mikdash?
Both, I guess.
No, well, nowadays it's how do we paskin in all of this? Lamaisa. There's a lot. I just say we paskin like I say it makes a practical difference nowadays. seems to make hardly any difference at all. But look at this. There is, however, and this is, I'd say, we can certainly ensure this is really recorded and can go out to the ladies. Although it's going
You
to
could
cost
say,
us
would I get a less? Would I buy a cheaper lulav to buy her a more expensive dress?
The famous story. Sholem Eisen, I remember him well, a wonderful Rob. He was a wonderful. Everybody went to him for sukkahs. He had we know about the Israeli tiles, and especially in the olden days, we had tiles on the ground. You'd come in with your hadassim, and you want to check whether they're kosher and the right height. He would hold the hadassim, and he knew exactly the length of the tiles. I'm just mentioning this because he was the man when it came to working out shiurim and everything. He was a wonderful robber of Sholem Eisen. And he was the Boki on so many different halachas. This is really to answer your question, Anthony. He was a Boki right across. But everybody came. He was the man. There was a massive queue to show your esrog, whether this is a problem, isn't this a problem, is it muhuda, is it not muhuda? So apparently this is a famous story. I don't know the person it happened to, but it's recorded and it's apparently an absolute correct story. Somebody went to Reb Sholem Eisen with this absolutely top class esrog, out of this world. And he went to show Rabbi, I mean, people just show the Rob their esrog, but there was absolutely no question at all, as far as he could see. It was Muhammad, this great Koyal man, and he spent a lot of time searching for this most beautiful esrog, which he'd got. So here he is, just making sure what he's here. So he's got this beautiful esrog, and he comes in to Reb Sholem Eisen. And Reb Sholem Eisen says, it's not kosher. And he's stunned, absolutely stunned. He said, no, this is not kosher for you. He said, what do you mean? I can't find anything better. I know, I'm very medactic. I'm not going to be able to find anything better for me, better. He says, how much did it cost you? And he told him. And he said, I want you to pay a fraction. He told him the amount. I want you to look for a esrog of the fraction of the amount he paid. And I want the rest of the money to go to ensure your wife gets a dress and the children get their shoes. And then it goes right through a whole list. Your mitzvah is v'somachtu b'chagecha as well. Yeah, you don't have to have the most muhuda dike esrog if you have to cut down because of expenses. So that's really the answer to your question, Anthony. You've got to ensure that you might have to drop down. You would have had a wonderful simcha having this top class esrog. If it means you'll have to have an esrog which is kosher, nobody's asking you to have an esrog which is not kosher, but it means there'll be more funds available for other people in the household having their simcha. You've got to do that. And
would you go as far as saying don't get any arba minim at all?
No. No. I take that back. I take that back. I can't tell you, but I would have said yes, because you can be Makai in the mitzvah baba money with somebody else's. You can give a matona manasa hachsir, and you can down the mitzvah. I thought you meant you can't do the mitzvah at all. If you're the only one in town or something, that may be a separate point. But you can be Makai in the mitzvah with someone else's. Your mitzvah, you've got to ensure that everyone in the house is happy. And let me tell you now, going to halacha, I know it's going to cost the men a bob or two, as they say. If you have a look in Simon Tov,
do we end the share here then?
If you like, you can stop recording now.
It's going to cost us some money.
No way.
I have a question. I don't know. Can I ask a question?
By all means. Yeah, ask a question, please.
It's just that there's the whole discussion that seems to not remind me. Sort of, there's a strong impression I have of a discussion where we were doing Pesachim.
Yeah. Oh, wow! What?
And we were discussing Kiddush. Can I carry? Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
So we were discussing the cups and whether women were, who should have, if individual cups or not. And there was a discussion about the wine or grape or whether
grape juice.
And there was a similar discussion about whether the women should be specially dressed, rather than that they should be part of the celebration.
You are absolutely right. And if I was there, I would pat you on the back.
But the conclusion was something like that everyone was sort of a part of the mitzvah, because obviously everyone came out of Yetziat Mitzrayim, so we were all equal. But there was a sort of a moment where it wasn't sure whether the...
Absolutely. You're right. That moment is what we're talking about here. You're absolutely right. The same Gemara came up in, and in fact, the same Gemara you'll see here quoted in Tosfos. Tosfos quotes a Gemara in Psochim Kuf Tes, and that exact Gemara we had, you may well have been there, well, great memory, Malcolm. You're absolutely right, the same Gemara, and the conclusion's the same though. There was a moment we thought it wasn't going to be there, like there was here too, but the conclusion is the same, that in fact, the ladies, there's a mitzvah, the samachta b'chagecha, meaning that the man has a chiyuv to ensure that the wife has something special for Yom Tov. Now, let me just tell you what it says in Halacha, and I'll say today, Wednesday, there's still a week before Yom Tov, so you can do what you like. Have a look in Siman Tov Kuf Chof Tes, which is 529. And then I've got a Mishnah, you have a look at Sif base, you can look it up. And it says there, Chayav Odom Liyo Someach B'Tov Leid B'Moed. A person's b'chuyev. V'samachta b'chagecha. Person's got to be b'simcha. Actually, the Mishnah quotes, he says it's a mitzvahs asay min ha-Torah. Wow. Carry on. And the Mishnah also says, paskin like the Rambam, v'noheges gam banoshim. It applies to ladies too. Now, if the lady is self-sufficient, that's one thing, but may not be self-sufficient. But look at I've continued the halacha here. It says, who v'ishtoi uvonov v'chol hanilvim elo. Anyone who comes under his jurisdiction. He may have people staying with him. He may be looking after for certain individuals, whatever it is. Says the Gemara, Ketzad Mesamchon. How do you make them happy? Haktanim, the little ones, Noislechem Koloyos Ve'Goizim, even the little kids. Make sure they've got sweets. I don't know what today, chocolates. Egoizim, they used to have nuts in those days. Noshim, wait for it. Yeah, just 1 minute. Yes. Noshim, Koine Lahem Begodim, Betachshitim, Kafi Momoinoi. He should buy clothes, jewelry, according to his capability, according to what he can do. Kafi Momoinoi. And then he goes on to say, part of this mitzvah, the needy, the poor, im sho'or aniyim, together with other people. So the Mishnah quotes, Keitzav Mesamchon. So the Biur Halacha says, of course, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, there was a korban everybody could have. But now we don't have the korban, sadly. The big chiyuv for men, it's not a new tie, probably a long gone. He says yayin, because the pasuk says yayin yisamach levav enosh. So therefore, have a glass of wine is normally, actually the question is how much, certainly more than you normally have. Got to have a glass of wine, got to be drinking, yeah? See, your daughter's very keen on this, Simon. Obviously, she was listening about the gift for Yom Tov coming up. Good. Very interesting. So you see there, he says, ensuring that every person has to be happy and ensuring, I say the aniyim too. And he mentions there, kafima moinai, I don't know about nowadays, but it says the Mishnah, the Biur Halacha, if he hasn't got sufficient, new shoes, sounds like those days shoes were cheaper, not sure today, but whatever happens, they have to have something new, and it's great that it's coming a week before Yom Tov. You can still go online, although it depends on different people with different things. Maybe you ask the lady to select something yourself and then you pay for it, but whatever. But you know, that is very important. We're saying these halachas here that the ladies have a chiyuv. But he quotes this, and that's following what we mentioned before. Very powerful. Misha, says the Mishnah Berurah, you can imagine the Chofetz Chaim, we've seen the pictures of the Chofetz Chaim. Misha noel dalsei chatzeroi. He closes the doors, the gates of his chotzer. Yeah? V'oichel b'shoisei, he has a great time. He, his children, the wife. Those poor souls who don't have sufficient, doesn't look after them. Wow, very strong lotion coming up. I think we mentioned this before. Ein zu simchas mitzvah. That's not simchas mitzvah, but it's called simchas kreisai. It's just a boich, as they say in Yiddish. A simchas kreisai. It's a simcha of his own stomach, and that's all. And that's what, and therefore he says, very important to ensure that the poor people, maybe nowadays, of course, they can't be invited, not so easy to invite them, unless you're in Israel. But yeah, it's very important. He says, ensure that, say, the Gaboim are collecting to ensure that every person has. So it does fall very much from this Gemara we've just seen here, that the Chiyuv, as I say, of ensuring that the Simcha is not just for ourselves, not, I would say, just the men, ensuring that the ladies, so I say when it comes to jewelry or obviously whatever's needed, but otherwise ensuring the poor people as well, ensuring everyone's happy. If one's together with, a mother or whatever it is, ensuring she's happy and she's got something new to enhance the simcha. That is crucial. And that's really what we're saying here. So I think with that, we'd better stop. So in fact, according to these two things, to the two views, Rab Zera or Abaya, today it would make no difference whether the ladies are having a chiv in their own right or because of the husband, it doesn't matter. But really, he does say kfima moinoi. So say we're not talking about taking out massive loans, but kfima moinoi, whatever they can afford. But there should be something special for Yom Tov, and I say it's. I'm sure. I expect. How many participants we got? I expect quite a few people ringing me up, and the ladies saying, "Oh, I'm so pleased you had that chair," and the children too. So with that, gentlemen, hopefully everybody's well. We've got quite a few, 17 people here, which is great. I hope everybody's well. I think we've been through all the people. We haven't heard from Malcolm. You're well, Malcolm. Martin Kurz as well.